Everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us bright and early. We're going to give folks a few minutes to hop in. Please make yourselves comfortable. If you need to grab a coffee, a water, a snack, please go ahead and do so. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. If you want, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. So let us know who you are, what organization you're joining on behalf of. Ooh, and I love this energy in the chat already. I'm glad to see folks are just excited as we are for today. Welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. If you're joining us, we're giving folks a few minutes to log on. We know it's bright and early, so we're giving people until 9:05. And if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, please go ahead and do so. Let us know who you are and what organization you're with. So many powerhouses in the room this morning. Ooh, I love the unicorn in the chat. Beautiful. Good morning, everyone. All right, we're going to give folks one more minute. If you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, please go ahead and do so. Let us know what organization folks are from.
Good morning. I'm Rossi Thomas from Wilma's Nest.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
All righty. It's 9:05. I think people are going to continue to join us in the next couple of minutes, but why don't we go ahead and get started for folks who are already here today. So I'll go ahead and kick us off, everyone. Welcome to the Nonprofit Readiness Summit. This is part of the Nonprofit Capacity Building Program, which we're going to share all of the details with you in just a moment. My name is Maggie Acosta. I'm going to be the host. I'm part of a large team of folks who are making this program possible. And I'm joining as one of the folks from the UIC School of Public Health. We have folks from the city here, and we have folks from other lead organizations who are going to share lots of information for all of you and what all you can expect in terms of support from this program to help build your nonprofit and get yourselves prepared for City of Chicago funding. So with that, I'm going to take us to some housekeeping items. All right. So just so folks know, closed caption is available. So if you'd like to get captions for today's session, please look for the captions button at the bottom of your screen. There's also American Sign Language on. It's all automatically turned on, so you don't need to turn on an interpretation feature. And there's also Spanish. So for Spanish, please look for a Spanish line at the bottom of your screen. You'll click the little interpretation window and find the Spanish room. So we are going to have plenty of time for Q&A today. So please drop your questions in the chat as we go. And someone from our team is going to be compiling them and then reading them out loud when it's time for Q&A. So we're going to ask so that we can streamline today's session for folks to keep themselves on mute until it is time for the Q&A, and then we'll allow folks to come off or to keep putting questions in the chat. And then folks saw as they entered the room, but this is a reminder that we are recording the session. So if there is anything that you miss, any links or information that you want to follow up on, know that the session is being recorded and we will post the recording and the slides online for you to review later. And we know that some folks are joining us slowly, but if for any issues at all, for tech related issues, anything that is not working on your Zoom today, please email us at sphcollaboratory@uic.edu for assistance, and we'll try to make sure to get you back into the room so that everything works correctly for you. And with that, I will share the agenda for today. So we are going to be together from 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. and we have an exciting lineup of speakers for you all. So to kind of lay the ground on what the nonprofit capacity building program is all about, we'll have someone from our team introduce you to the program, let you know what sessions there are, and let you know how to sign up for the sessions. Then we'll jump into some of the basics for applying for a city grant. So that's going to last about an hour, and then we'll have the next session, which is focused on decoding RFPs, which are requests for proposals, and how to build a strong application. So we'll have someone who writes RFPs, who reviews them, give you all the ins and outs about preparing a strong application. And then we are going to bring you a panel of nonprofit leaders. So you're going to hear from folks who have been in your shoes before, and they're going to share some of the lessons learned from pursuing government funding. So bring lots of questions for them. They'll be sharing tips and tricks and advice for all of you. And then we'll wrap up with a couple more resources, the dates for upcoming sessions. You'll want to make sure to have a pencil or a pen or your calendar open so you can record what dates we're going to have. And then we'll have a post survey. So we'll give you the opportunity to share what kind of future supports you want. And then we'll plan based off of the feedback that you give us. So please, please complete that survey. Let us know what other kind of supports you'd like. All right. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, who's going to give an overview of the Chicago Recovery Plan and the nonprofit capacity building program. So Bea, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Bea Floresca, and I'm a graduate assistant working with the UIC School of Public Health for this program. So as Maggie had mentioned already, I'm just here to talk a little bit about what CRP is and what the nonprofit capacity building program is. So to start us off, what is the Chicago Recovery Plan, or CRP for short? And the CRP is the City of Chicago's plan to uplift funding to create an equity-based investment strategy. So this strategy really works along the lines of the American Rescue Plan Act, which I'll be talking more about later, and is hoping to work towards a more sustainable economic recovery after we continue to feel the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I've mentioned investment, but where is all this money coming from? The funding for CRP is a mix of money from that American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and also $600 million in local bond funds. So all this funding is being distributed alongside other available resources in the city budget to try to help to maximize opportunities over the next 3 to 5 year funding period. And if you want to learn more, please visit the site that's listed here. The slides will be distributed after the summit as well if you need more, and my lovely coworker Kayla is dropping those in the chat as well if you'd like to explore more. But relatedly, as I mentioned, we should probably talk about what ARPA is. And some of y'all already may be familiar with what ARPA is, but the American Rescue Plan Act was created with 3 goals in mind: to provide financial relief, to combat COVID-19, and to calm the economy. And while all of you probably have some experience with these goals over the years, for the purposes of this summit, we will focus on that direct financial impact part. So the direct financial relief kind of came into 2 modes: that individual economic impact payment. So some of y'all may be familiar with the child tax credits or other forms of those individual payments. And then also the state and local fiscal recovery funds. And that second mode of financial relief is what went into CRP. So to be more specific, $1.9 billion in state and local fiscal recovery funding was allocated by Congress to the city of Chicago from ARPA. And all of this money is set to be used during a timeline from March 2021 until December 2024. And once again, there's more links if you want to explore about that. And as the nonprofit capacity building program is only one piece of this puzzle, I also wanted to point folks in the direction of the city's CRP data dashboards, which are available online via that link that will be dropped in the chat. This here on the slide is just a screenshot of what you would see if you were to go on to the data dashboards, and they provide a breakdown of how all of this money is being used so far. And while we definitely don't have time to go through all of the info that's on this part of these data dashboards, I highly recommend checking them out via that site, since you can kind of see where funding is going, and you may be able to better understand and pivot towards what sort of initiatives folks need more support on, and or have funding for your orgs and missions. But that brings us to what we're all here for today. To get into the specifics of the nonprofit capacity building program, this initiative was created in response to COVID, having left many nonprofits to experience a lot of financial hardship. I mean, we all know, due to the various effects of the pandemic and other important social movements, we know that nonprofits have been experiencing a significant increase in demand for services without an equal increase in funding and capacity. So in attempts to support those nonprofits, the city of Chicago created this program to try to provide technical assistance and capacity building services for those impacted. So while we are already in the second quarter of initiatives, there are still lots of events and seminars that are going to be happening. And some of these topics include what's listed here on the slide. And all of these workshops are facilitated by capacity building organizations who are well oriented with the Chicago ecosystem. And I'll mention a lot of these partners later in my little portion of this presentation. So in terms of events, we can break it down into 2 categories: the Readiness Summit, which y'all are already here for, and the application assistance things. So, with the Readiness Summit, these happen every quarter, and really we have lots of sessions on best practices and other tips and tricks for applying for funding. And sometimes we also discuss upcoming funding opportunities, and these all happen virtually. But on the flip side, if you're, other than once a quarter, we have lots of other things happening for application assistance. We have monthly webinars that are on more specific subject matters, and these are held live and up to 90 minutes long, but they're recorded and posted online on the website to refer back to later if you miss one. We also have those small group workshops, usually held on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. And these small group workshops serve as opportunities to connect with peers and other experts to discuss upcoming grants and specific organizational challenges. And finally, we have one-on-one application assistance. This is done by appointment, and there are certain windows of times that you can sign up for these, and there are opportunities to connect with peers and other experts to really talk about stuff like applications, iSupplier, and other topics as needed. And those can be held in person or virtually. And as mentioned before, these are all the awesome, partners on the nonprofit capacity building program. I wish I had time to go through all of them, but hopefully y'all see some familiar faces. So I just wanted to say a quick shout out to all of these organizations for the work that y'all have been doing for this project so far. And finally, this is all available on the website, and I won't read off all of these dates for you, but we do have a lot of upcoming supports coming up. Just to highlight some things quickly, we have a new webinar coming up on June 29th, pretty soon at 10 a.m. on risk assessment for nonprofit orgs. We have a ton of small group workshops, as you can see on the side here. Feel free to take a screenshot of this or check out the website for more. And then of course we have that one-on-one application assistance as needed. But once again, this is all available on the website. Feel free to check that out to sign up. And thanks y'all for listening to a little bit about what CRP and the nonprofit capacity building program is. And I'm actually going to pass it over to Goody.
Good morning. As we get set up technically, I just want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Goody Kapadia. Somebody's going to spotlight me. I'm going to stop it. My name is Goody Kapadia, and I am one of the co-leads for this program for the UIC School of Public Health. Yeah, thank you for sharing the background. You're going to hear a lot about the partners and a lot about the events and supports that are available throughout the sessions today. Again, as a reminder, everything is being recorded, and you will have access to these slides afterwards. So even though it seems like a lot of information is going to be coming at you quickly this morning, just remember that you have access to it at a later point as needed. Next slide, please. So for the next hour, I'm going to try to level set some understanding. So the information that I am sharing is some basic information around really understanding the process of proposals, grants, and applying through the city. I do want to acknowledge that many of these slides are from the partners that were listed, and some of them are here today in the session. So I am going to be sharing other people's knowledge and information. If I misrepresent anything, please feel free to jump in via chat or share anything else. We are leaving time at the end of this session for Q&A. So as I am presenting, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. Again, our colleague Kayla will be collecting all of them, and we will try to address as many questions as possible. For the rest of today, all the questions that are included in the chat or shared in the presentations will be compiled and shared at the end as well with the recordings, etc. So again, level setting and really just getting to know a little bit about if your organization is ready to apply for a city grant. Next slide. So what is an RFP? As Maggie mentioned, RFP stands for Request for Proposal. Why are we calling this out? Because there are many words that can be used or many different ways organizations understand these asks. They can be RFQs, requests for quotes, RFIs, request for information, RFA, request for applications. The City of Chicago uses RFPs, which are requests for proposals. The other piece is that applicants who get selected are known as delegate agencies. So anyone who receives a contract or grant with the city will be listed as called delegate agencies. Again, all the different city services, when they are requesting supports, they will request an RFP, and all RFPs are posted online at the Department of Procurement Services website. I will be sharing more about where you can find RFPs and the process to apply. Next slide. So iSupplier is one of the biggest portals that you should be familiar with, and it is for all purchasing activities, meaning that this is the system that is used for both submitting your proposal, managing your contact information with the city, but also later for budgeting, invoices, and to get paid. So it's part of the full process, and it is important for you as an organization to be registered in iSupplier. I do want to put out a disclaimer that different departments may use different tools. So the cultural affairs might use another system for it, but this is the primary portal, and that's why we wanted to call it out. So again, as I mentioned, this is where you maintain your contact information. This is where, as information is updated for your organization, such as board of directors, your articles of incorporation, anything that needs to be identified with your organization, this should be updated and maintained in this system. Next slide. So some key links and important ways to look at when you go to the iSupplier. There is a login and registration. So again, as I mentioned, if you are interested in doing any kind of contractual or grant work with the system, you should have a registration, and the sooner you get that yourself registered into the system, the better. This is also where you can see where there are current bids. So again, we're talking about the language. When you are responding to an RFP, you're bidding on that. The other thing that I really want to call out, there are two components. One, there's lots of online training materials to help you walk through the processes. These are in different formats. A lot of them are just PDFs that you can download. So again, we are providing supports. There are other additional agencies that are providing supports, but you can take the matter in into your own hands and learn what you need to learn, or try to find some answers to questions you may have through these online training materials. Also, there is the last button that you see there is for signing up for alerts. So if you are interested in continuing to work with the city, if you want information pushed at you, we strongly encourage you to sign up for alerts to get your information in there. And so information can be pushed out when appropriate RFPs are posted. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of information on this slide. We wanted to, the information that I want to call out, as I mentioned, iSupplier is where all of your information about your organization lives. To register, you must have a federal employer identification number, an FEIN. You must have your tax information, your IRS W-9s, and your articles of incorporation. And the city may ask to look at this document. If you have multiple profiles, if you, the city is working on compiling these. So there might be requests as you are registering in the system to show any of these documentations so that we can make sure that we have one clean profile for you. Now, I want to call out that registering in iSupplier can take up to 5 business days. So if you are interested in working with the city, it is strongly, strongly, strongly encouraged to register into the system. So one of the first things you should do after today's webinar, if you do not have a registration in iSupplier, is to do that, because it can take up to 6 weeks. Or, we don't want any delays, so register as early as possible. I also want to call out that there are customer supports via phone and email. Again, that information is on the left hand of the screen. And so that if you have any issues while you are registering, they can help you walk through any of that. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot of what you will see, again, when you go to the iSupplier portal. This is where you will, if you are looking for opportunities, you will click on the current bids and solicitation, and this is where all of the opportunities will be made available. Next slide. And it will take you to a page that looks very much like this. This is just an example. And just to walk through a little bit of what you're seeing is that you'll see that the department or the city department that is posting the RFP is on the left-hand side. It is asking for, what kind of work. And then there's a lot of details about the solicitation, the ask really. But when you want to get to the details, you're looking for these infinity/eyeglasses icon. Again, to the right, they're circled in red. And if you click on that, you'll see what is included in the application. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what we're talking about. So again, this is more information about that one specific RFP. If you want to look at the documents and the requests, highly recommend doing this without starting the application. If you look towards the middle of the top of the page, there's a PDF file link. And if you click on that, that will open up a PDF file about the full proposal, and it will give you the information that's needed. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to apply and what to look for. When you are ready to apply, you'll see the login buttons to the right, and it will get you into the system to do the application itself. Next. So I mentioned that all of the RFPs are posted in iSupplier. There are additional, as Bea mentioned, we are trying to compile and share more information through the Chicago Recovery Plan. So it's to, again, call out the opportunities that are available right now. So if you go to the chicago.gov Recovery Plan site, you will notice that there is another place where you can link back into the current bids and grant opportunities, the current RFPs and grant opportunities for the city. So you have multiple ways of getting to this information. All right, I'm going to take a breath. Again, remind if there's any questions of the information that I shared, feel free to enter them into the chat. The next half of this is about the grant process. Again, level setting, many of you have already walked through this, but want to make sure that we're all talking in the same way. So next slide. So who are all the individuals that are important in the grant process? Well, there's you, the nonprofit applicant. And as I've said and repeated myself a couple of times, make sure your organization is registered in iSupplier. You have to be proactive to research and look for the proposals and then create that proposal. And then if awarded, it is your responsibility to invoice, to get paid, etc. Then you have the issuing department. So as we called out previously, there are multiple departments in the city that are making requests to have services for their divisions. They are the ones that are creating and managing the RFP process, or the content of the RFP. They're the ones that are putting the specific requirements of what they're looking for, and they will be reviewing the invoicing process. And then you have DPS, and I believe we called out DPS in another slide, and I did not say what that stood for. So there's the Department of Procurement Services. And this is the place where iSupplier lives, and they are the ones that manage all of that. Then you have the Office of Budget Management. They are the ones providing trainings, that lovely button that I said to make sure you take a look at. And then you have the Finance Department, who should be your best friend because they are processing payments and getting the money to you when you need it. Next slide. So here's the full life cycle. And I'm going to walk through each of these steps. And again, we're going to go into some additional details, but if there are questions, feel free to ask. We do have other sessions today that walk through current components of this. And then if you have clear questions, as a reminder, there are other organizations that can provide one-on-one support for the whole process. So So again, the RFP is designed at the department level. So as I mentioned before, there are the issuing departments. There are different units within that are creating the RFP, usually in partnership with the mayor's office and using procedures that have been developed by brilliant lawyers and financial minds to make sure that there's equity built in, that there are all the pieces and regulations included. Though the process can vary across departments and there might be variances based on the funding source, the original funding of where the money is coming from. This is kind of an overview of the general process. So the department will develop a program or a model. They will see a need, and based on that need, they will develop a request for proposals and a scoring rubric. And these pieces are very important. So the request itself includes multiple components. It says why they're making the ask, what the ask is trying to serve, but then it also includes the details of what to do to apply and how you will be scored to get selected for the RFP grant. This is then publicly posted on iSupplier, on our website, etc. In that RFP, usually there is a pre-bidder conference. And what this means, and typically now, once upon a time, it used to just be a conference call. Now it will be a Zoom or a virtual meeting, but it is an opportunity for individuals, organizations that are interested in replying to that RFP to learn more about the RFP from the city itself, also to ask questions. So I would highly recommend, if you are interested in an RFP, to ensure that somebody from your organization can participate in these pre-bidder conferences. It is also important to remember that as questions come up, even though a proposal is written to the, to all the specifications, there may be changes. And so to keep an eye out for updated information in iSupplier. And then there will be a due date where the applications are due, and the internal departments will review the proposals based on that scoring rubric that was listed in the RFP. And again, delegate agencies, as I mentioned earlier, the organizations that are selected will be notified. Then there's the contractual process, the actual work, and getting paid. That was a lot of information, but we're going to keep going. So first things first, in the RFP, it will indicate if the RFP is designated for you, and it will say our eligibility requirements. So there are some basic eligibility requirements for most city RFPs. You must be an Illinois-based nonprofit that is registered as a 501c3. You could be in the process, but note that many of these requests will say that by the start of the program, you must have your registered 501c3 designation. You must be incorporated at least 12 months prior to applying. So again, look at timelines when you're thinking about how to source these funds. Another key thing is that the incorporation of your organization has to be located in the city of Chicago. So if you are incorporated elsewhere outside of the city of Chicago, but still serve the city, you will not typically be able to contract through the RFP process for the city. So just be mindful that even though you may primarily serve the residents and are located elsewhere, you must be able to show that you're incorporated in the city. And if you look at that fourth slide, demonstrate that half of your programming occurs within city limits. There is a need for a city address, no PO boxes. So these are just some basic requirements. And again, take a further look. Also, are these funds appropriate for the work that you're doing or the work that you would like to do? So as I had mentioned before, there are depending on the originating source of the funding, which means that are the original funds coming from the feds, from the state, and there might be even originating city, they may have different restrictions, and understanding what you can do and if it works for what you would like to do. So there are federal and city uniform guidances. The previous summit did talk a little bit about this. There's more information on the web about this, but there are restrictions, and these are some examples. This is not a comprehensive list, but you cannot do capital improvements. You cannot purchase permanent depreciable equipment valued at more than $5,000. Another thing that we've some of these funding restrictions include is that you cannot apply on behalf of another organization. So if you are not ready to apply, again, this is a great opportunity to kind of build up that muscle through the trainings that are being offered through the capacity building efforts, and or potentially thinking about looking into partnerships. So it's very crucial to look at, do you as an organization have all the general materials that are required? And what is that? So we're going to go to the next slide. Now, this is a pretty big, long list. I'm not going to read all of it, but as I mentioned before, there are required documentation to even get into the iSupplier system. And that includes the articles of incorporation. You will be requested to have insurance, a state good standing letter. You also may be asked to show any of these documentations, so the city may come back to you. So just be prepared. If you look, that there is also a lot of, there are many requirements around financial statements and the ability to show that. So again, as if you are a newer organization or as you're beginning to look into applying through the city, these are components that you should really look through to make sure that you can meet the requirements. Boards and staff demographics are also another piece that get asked many times. So it's just good to start preparing some of this documentation. So if you're a first-time applicant, I mentioned some of this before, but here are just a few tips. RFPs are posted for at least 2 weeks. That is very quick, but typically 4 weeks. So again, if you are interested in looking for funds, you just have to keep your finger on the pulse at all times. Reading an RFP is a talent and a skill of patience, I would say, but always read it in full. A new trick that I just learned, I want to say from one of our partners, is that when you're reading an RFP, most of these RFPs, as I mentioned, are in PDF format. You know, do a quick search and look for the words must include, required, and pull all of those out. And this will help you create a list to see what are the requirements and can your organization meet them. It's also very critical, I mentioned earlier in the process, early on, the scoring rubric is listed in the RFP. They tell you these are the elements we will be reviewing, and this is how they will get weighted, and this is how you are compared to other organizations. Keep that in mind as you are applying for the proposal, because it's very clear what components are important. I mentioned this before. Attend the pre-bidders conference. You can ask questions, get clarity, and you know, there are a lot of workshops, so take the help. It's out there. All right, so we found the RFP. we have read the RFP, we have written and applied for the RFP. Here are a couple of things when you are ready to submit. Please note that all applications must be submitted by 12 p.m. noon on the day of the RFP due date. Set reminders, give yourself time. I will say this, electronic systems are not perfect. As we learned this morning, as we were testing the system for our webinars, there can always be glitches. It's best to give yourself some grace and time when submitting. So be sure that you can get it in early so that there are any hurdles, we can address them. And that, you know, late applications will just not be accepted. That is just how it works. Once you have submitted, you will get an email from workflowmailer@cityofchicago.org. This email can go into lots of different spaces, so make sure you check for it. And if you need, again, supports, there are ways to ask for that, but definitely work with your IT department as well, as it may get spammed or blocked. So calling those out. So now you've submitted the application, you sit back and the work is on the department. Applications are reviewed by the department staff, and sometimes they do include external partners. And again, as a reminder, it is reviewed based on the criteria that's listed in the RFP. There are no secrets. There's no, you know, hidden things that will make you stand out more. If you meet the requirements, that is what you are being compared on. And then once the award or the selection is based on multiple factors, which include that scoring, the ability of the funding, the availability of funding. So if there is a full pot and it is, usually there'll be a number that says there is $1 million up to $100,000 awards. And then, you know, there's also, again, these things will be listed based on community needs. So which part of the city needs more or less supports, etc. So I walked through a lot of this, but just calling out again. Actually, this is the contract life cycle. Apologies. Sorry, I had my notes on the opposite screen. So once you have submitted and been accepted, that step one is that RFP being selected and you now becoming a delegate agency. There are multiple steps that go through to create the contract, to then execute it with your organization doing the work, implementing that program. That's the hard part. But then to remember that you are going to be doing the work and then invoicing for reimbursement. We're going to talk a little bit about that payment system. And then there is a closeout process for all proposals as well. So there could be an audit just to make sure all the monies were spent appropriately, the program met the requirements, etc. Again, there will be supports for what happens after you get selected as well. So saying this is very important. It takes time for the funds to come to your organization. You need to be prepared to use your own funds to then get reimbursed for the work you will do. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this, iSupplier is the system that is used for invoices and vouchering. And again, there are supports. It can be tricky, but it's important to remember that you will carry the burden of the work until you are then able to invoice and get paid. So just remember, there are multiple tutorials on iSupplier. Make sure you have all your documents. I have shared lists. Make sure you start pulling those together. And then know that each department has different preferences or specifications. So when you are looking at things, even though things may feel like they're repetitive, make sure you read everything that they send, because there might be differences, nuances between departments, etc. Last slide. And I have said this a few times, you'll hear it a few times more. There is a lot of support. So even though this is just on the vouchering, as I mentioned, there's a lot of support for the whole process from beginning to end. There's the one-on-one counseling through this nonprofit capacity building program. There are online tutorials through iSupplier, and then I shared there is a phone number and an email support. Use all the supports that are provided to you. I'm going to take a deep breath and see if there are questions that we can address before we go to our next session.
Hi, Goody. We did have a few questions come into the chat, and if people have more, feel free to put them in there. So the first question that we have is kind of about who's eligible to apply. So there's two parts that folks have questions on. First, so we have a fiscally sponsored organization that is not incorporated yet, currently an LLC, and then an organization that is applying for 501c3 status but does not yet have it. Are those organizations eligible to apply?
I'm going to call on my friends at the city if they can jump in. Hayel, I don't know if you have the ability to answer.
Hi, Goody. This is
Yeah.
Julia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we don't, generally speaking, because it takes such a long time for that 501c3 to be processed by the IRS. Generally speaking, we do not encourage people whose IRS paperwork is still in flux to apply, because we cannot legally, the city of Chicago cannot legally enter into a contract with an organization that is not able to do business in the state of Illinois. So that means everything from good standing, you have to be in good standing by the state of Illinois. And you also have to be able to do business, which means you need that FIN number. And if you're a 501c3, you need that 501c3 letter. In the case where somebody is in that sort of, not purgatory, but that kind of gray area where they haven't gotten their paperwork, then we really suggest that people go through a fiscal agent. In the iSupplier system, or the e-procurement system that you've been talking about, we ask that fiscal agent is the person that's going to, or the organization that's going to make the application. So the organization that wants to do the work but isn't legally capable of doing the work by the city of Chicago's standards is going to come in as a subcontractor, and the contract, that delegate agency contract that you referenced, is going to be issued in the name of the fiscal agent, and they will pay it out. I see here, and there's a question about the slide said fiscal agents cannot apply for funds on behalf of another developing organization. So I don't know if you wanted to talk more about that particular area. This is the information I am sharing is just general operating information from our contracts unit, but it is not ARPA specific.
Sherry, I will look more into, I know it does, we did get that slide that does say that that if you are not ready to apply, you cannot apply, or other organizations cannot apply on your behalf. I will get more clarification on if those are specific to ARPA funds, and give you a solid answer on that one. And Julia, you are next. If you want to turn on your camera, there are multiple questions that maybe you can help support as well.
Sure. Yeah, it was lovely to you. Just so people know, I work for the Department of Family and Support Services. I'm going to be presenting in the next thing, and the next thing presentation, but that my job is solely to manage the RFP process for the department. And it was really fun to listen to goody reference materials that I've written. All of those TA things are mostly mine. I've worked for the department for a really long time. So
I don't know if there's another question. Sorry, Julia, I don't want to cut you off, but if there's another question that we can try to get answered before we hand it off to Julia.
So
Yeah.
I was just looking through the chat.
Yeah, I've got a list of them here. So the next question was, what type of insurance is required to register at iSupplier?
We usually ask for general liability insurance. And there's a list in all of our RFPs about all the insurance requirements for each individual RFP that we issue. We don't require that those things be fully funded or fully done until you get a contract with us, but you should be able to show us proof. You should be able to upload proof of general liability. And that's for my department. I don't know if there's anybody here from health or DCASE or any of the other departments that wants to chime in about their process.
All right. The next question is, what is the average time for reimbursement after invoicing?
Our average time for reimbursement really is, it's a hard number to really share. It can be as quick as 15 or 30 days. But if you have, if I wouldn't count on it, if you, what I think the problem that we experience a lot is that people do not submit the reimbursement correctly. And then they don't check up and figure out that that reimbursement has not been submitted correctly. And then they don't get reimbursed for a very long time. So it can be as quick as 15 or 30 days. It can be as long as like forever. And it's the vouchering and reimbursement process is, I think, perhaps most positively thought of as a partnership. And that you're as the person submitting the voucher, you need to kind of be an active member of that getting yourself paid partnership. And that will maybe make your experience quicker. I don't know, Goody, do you have anything to share or?
No, I think it, as I mentioned before, just to know that you need to be prepared to carry the burden on the funds.
Thank you for that. Our next question asks if 501c6 organizations can apply for grants from the city.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, they ask if 501c6 organizations can apply.
Hi, I can speak to that. This is Haya Olivares from the BACP team. 501c6s are eligible to apply for certain RFPs. We do work with a lot of chambers of commerce, so it'll be outlined in the RFP if 501c6s are eligible.
Thank you. So it depends on the specific RFP.
Again, it's very crucial to read your eligibility and the requirements posted in the RFP.
So our next question, and I encourage folks to keep putting them in the chat if you have them, Somebody says that their organization is registered in a suburb and has an office in Chicago. Are they eligible to apply? And if not, is there anything they can do to be eligible?
Well, I'm gonna look to my team. I think I see Maura. I don't know if there's a general answer to that.
Hi, in terms of what can be, this is Maura Downs from the WBDC. In terms of what can be done about it, I mean, it's getting an office in the city of Chicago to meet the RFP requirement, unfortunately. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just the requirement.
Actually, Kayla, this organization has already an
Oh,
office. Yeah.
Yeah, they have an office in Chicago, but they are registered in a suburb.
Oh, you can fix it with the Illinois Secretary of State and just file and if you're a corporation, an annual report that changes your address. It's like a revised annual report. Sorry, I misunderstood. It's a very easy form and you just change the address to the city of Chicago. If that's where your office is, that's an easy fix.
For most of our funding, we do allow, we want to make sure that you're providing services in the city and that you have the ability, you have a site in the city, but we do not require that your major office or that, your billing office is outside the city. Although generally speaking, we have found that most of our contractors end up actually being in the city.
I think we might have one more question. Time for one more if there's anything. I did see an ask about how to get the supports, and we will relink into the chat the City of Chicago nonprofit capacity building program.
Yeah, so with that, people can get one-on-one support if needed. So our last question then is, do delegates submit invoices once program is completed?
In my department, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You can start submitting vouchers for and invoicing us as soon as your program begins. And in fact, for some, if not all of our contracts, we want to see you voucher prior to the end of your contract, because we want to see you spending down your money and not leaving that money on the table for us to then figure out in the 11th hour how to reallocate. So the minute you get that contract and the contract start date, the minute you hit that contract start date, you should be spending that money and invoicing us. As I said before, sometimes that invoice process reimbursement process and experience can be a lengthy one. And so you really want to voucher and invoice for the things that you're spending as soon as you can figure out and send it over to us, because especially as a newer agency, you might need some practice getting the voucher system down. It's a great way to establish a relationship with the person who's going to be handling your vouchers, either with our department or the comptrollers, and kind of getting your practice makes perfect, especially in that e-procurement system, which is highly unintuitive. That I would say no, like if you I was like say cup of coffee, but to be honest with you, most of our funding doesn't fund or reimburse for snacks. So like that ream of computer paper you bought on the way in, keep the receipt and send it to us.
Some contracts also indicate how often, right, invoicing can happen. So it can be at monthly intervals or based on deliverables met, things like that. So to keep that in mind. I see one more question about is EIN and FEIN the same? From my understanding, they are the same number. If anybody else has another understanding, please let me know. But it should be a 9-digit number for your organization.
We did have another question of whether a brick and mortar building is required or if a home office is acceptable for the organization.
I don't know if I have a specific answer to that. Meaning the organizations, I think it's what's registered, right, with the state as the address for the organization.
Can I
Generally speak- Sorry.
go ahead?
Oh, no,
I
no,
was
go
just
ahead. You
gonna
go ahead.
chime in on this one because I get a lot of questions about this. So this, again, more downs from the WBDC. I'd love to get more context to the question. This is something that we could help you with, kind of game plan out in a one-on-one counseling session, because it's not really a straightforward answer. The answer is really, you know, the city wants to see that you have the facilities necessary to perform on the grant. So, you know, if you are have a home office, that's not a problem if you are able to do what the grant requires from that home office. But it's not really a straightforward, this is a requirement, if that answers your question.
I would definitely underscore what Maura said. One thing though that I would have to say, and this is my own, like, this would be my own like flag to something like that. First of all, I'm going to look at your address. I'm not like Googling it, or I won't know if it's a home office necessarily, unless it's next door to me, in which case I'll be like, why is my name, you know, like, but I would say that at least for my department, and this isn't for DCASE or any other department, but at least for my department, most of the programs that we're doing and the kind of operations that we are going to require from you, from both an operations or program implementation and execution standpoint and a reporting standpoint, because our reporting requirements are rather high, that our grants or contracts are not very suitable to a sole proprietor who's just doing it on their own. Like it's like, for the most part, our opportunities are set up for an organization with multiple staff members that is capable of touching lots of people, or more people than one person who's doing, you know, one person shop could probably successfully do. And I don't say that to be discouraging or to say that it's not applying, you know, don't apply if you feel like you can do it. But at the same time, I do really counsel all organizations or potential applicants to look at their organization's capacity and set themselves up for success in city contracting, especially, or any kind of governmental contracts. Because I have seen over the years, organizations think that a governmental contract is going to solve some problems, and it ends up putting them out of business. Think of the government as a big ocean. And the ocean can deliver a lot of great things to you, but it also can inadvertently like smash your boat if the boat isn't big enough or you're not prepared.
We have a couple more questions in the chat, and then we will get to you, Ms. Wright. Couple questions about the SAM registration status. So generally, what is SAM registration status? And then how do nonprofits qualify for that number?
Maura, do you need to be unmuted? Is that how that? I think I did that by accident.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I don't mean to be hijacking your question and answer session, Gertie. SAM.gov is my little niche of expertise. I did a webinar a couple weeks ago that I was going to just very handily drop in the chat for you guys to use, but I just realized it's not posted yet. So I will get that posted. I don't know what happened, but the answer is you can make a one-on-one counseling appointment with me to go over SAM in great detail, because I have regularly talked for an hour about what is SAM and why is it so hard to use and why is it so complicated. I don't want to get too in the weeds on it, but in general, it's a system that the federal government uses for anyone that it is sending money to. So it's extraordinarily complicated because, countries that need to get funding from the federal government have to register. Non-for-profits all over the world, companies that do business with the federal government. So there is a ton of different people who have to register, and you as a nonprofit, because the city of Chicago is giving you federal funds, you got to register. So it's a little bit tricky because it's just cumbersome. But I have worked with SAM extensively, and I'm happy to kind of hold your hand through the process of applying. With most companies, I end up just we log on to SAM and I take you step by step through all the questions. So that's really the best way I would recommend to do it. And if you want to really get into what is it, what's a DUNS number, what's a SAM number, what's a cage code, I'm happy to work with you on that.
Thanks, Maura. And we have a link in the chat for how you could sign up for a one-on-one session with Maura or any of our other partners. Ms. Wright, if you want to ask your question, I think you should be able to unmute.
Great, thank you so much. So I just wanted to follow up to the comment that Julia made, because I also had a question about that. And Maura, thank you so much for talking about SAM's and a DUNS question I had also. So our nonprofit serves very vulnerable populations, youth and care through therapeutic, residential programming, veteran families, seniors in residential programs and things like that. We do not have a brick and mortar either. So our nonprofit is registered to my home address. So my annual reports are done. That's my home address that's posted. But we do not give out my home address, of course, because everything we do is at the therapeutic residential programs or at a police department when we hold community meetings or a public library. So whoever asked that question earlier, it was so on point, because that's exactly what we do. We're out in the field and we don't have our own nonprofit. And I almost got a nonprofit space, but thankfully I didn't, because everything went COVID and went down. So I would have really been in bad shape had I done that on my own. So for those types of programs, is it still going to be held to the same criteria? I mean, I know that the government's going to have a lot of reporting due, and we have a lot of volunteers, but because we're doing more community-based location type workshops and empowerment programs and retreats, we're always elsewhere. So I don't know, Julia, if there's more you can say about that, or if what you said earlier still applies and we just have to deal with it.
No, I mean, it sounds like you guys have you have a business model that supports what you're doing. There's lots and lots of ways to do this stuff, and there's no really one right way. And if you are able, because it sounds like because of the business model that you do, it does not require that you have a centralized site. I think that it's really important for the audience to note in your description that you have multiple people doing this work. Over the years that I do see people, we do get applications from somebody who's clearly a sole proprietor who thinks that this is how they're going to fund the next couple of years of their life. And the scope and the reporting requirements are simply too large for one person to operate the kind of program that we want them to operate, do the vouchering, do the reporting requirements, come to the meetings with various people, I don't see that as a feasible model, but what you've described sounds brilliant. And so kudos to you, and I wish you all of the luck. And since you serve basically all of our populations, definitely please apply to more.
Thank you. Oh my God, I'm so happy. Thank you.
We do have a little bit of time left for questions. We're done with our list, so if people have more, you can put it in the chat or just feel free to raise your hand. We just had a question come in. Do you recommend several smaller nonprofits work together in applying? And if so, is there a way to identify other small nonprofits?
I'll take a first stab at this. We just recently had a networking event where we did have an example of collaboratives applying together, and whether it's recommended or not, if you are a small nonprofit, leveraging your partners, we encourage that. I will let Julia and Maura say if there's technical issues to doing that, though.
Maura, do you want to go first?
I'm so sorry, I didn't listen to the question. I was focused on putting my SAM webinar is now in the chat for those who are interested, but I apologize.
I need to go to your SAM webinar. So the question was about the multi-partner applicant, or doing, small businesses or small nonprofits banding together to take on one contract. We would love to see those kinds of partnerships. The problem that that I see in my department coming from that particular application is that, and this is sort of my bad, or my department's bad, or the city's bad. 2 weeks is not a lot of time. We don't do 2-week applications, and I've done them before, but it's horrible. Nobody is happy. 4 weeks is still actually not enough. Stuff coming out of my department, I'm always pushing for 6 weeks, sometimes 8, but I almost never get 8. 6 is starting to be a real challenge. But even 6 weeks, I don't know if that's always enough time for multiple organizations to find each other, to digest a usually fairly dense or complex RFP document in a dense or complex programmatic model, and then find the 3 people that they really want to work with. Additionally, you're only going to be only one of you can apply. So one of you has to be that lead organization and the fiscal agent, and it's all well and fine to want to partner and do business with people. It's another thing to depend on somebody else for your money. And so I think that could possibly be a barrier. I don't know for sure. It would be a barrier. I could see it being a barrier for me, if I was doing this. I think, it says collaboration is a great way to maximize impact. What I generally see is a list of partners, and maybe they're coming in, the partners are coming in as subs or subcontracts to a given partnership, but it's whatever happens past contract, I don't really see. That's going to be a program person that's going to know what's going on. You can always write a budget line in for consulting, and that's how that's probably where you're going to most appropriately be paying out your subcontractors. But I would love to, we have nothing against the partnership. And in fact, some of our standard RFP language includes that kind of stuff. And then this other thing about, is there a way to identify? So many times, especially with our larger youth organization RFPs, we'll get people that are like, I really want to, I'm not like, I can do 2/3 of this, or I can do half of this, but I can't do the other half. Like, do you know somebody? And that is actually where people like Goody and Maura and their organizations are really much, much more appropriate. You can't talk to me. I'm part of the funding, the funder. And so I can't, and we have like very strict or not, I don't know, they're strict. Like, we have guidelines that we have to follow about ethics. And so we can't put partnerships together because that's a violation, because that's showing preference, or, that's showing preference in one way or another from our applicant pool. If I'm like, oh, I love these 2 people, they should meet, like, I can't blind date you, like,
On that
Um,
note, Julia, you're correct. There are other organizations that can help. We are hoping at UIC-SBH that we will be able to do another networking event, and that we can then, really help, other organizations meet each other. I am going to cut us off just to keep us on time, but I want to thank everybody for jumping in and backing me up. So thank you to our partners, and I'm going to hand it off to Julia at this time.